Jack Davis, we call this meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee together. It's 7:32. We have a quorum. So the first thing we're going to do is adjourn into executive session for discussion on the school security pursuant to CGSA 1-200, subparagraph 6, subparagraph C. So we will stop the recording. Okay, we have ended the executive session. I can allow Clara back in. I need a motion to approve the security items for the Board of Ed's request of $1,074,000. Do I have a motion? I have Beth. I have Bill as a second. All in favor? Raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Leon, if you want to go, unless you want to hear how they dealt with the deficit, or to add to that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I'll listen tomorrow.
All right. So I did suggest that you go to the document that Rich Rudel puts together, which was the May 23rd document, which the first 5 pages really described everything that was going on at the school at that time. If you start off with this, at the beginning of the year, the deficit was about $600,000 to $700,000, and based upon certain things, they've been able to reduce it to now being $181,250. I think I handed out a document, or I may have passed that document from Alan on to going on the package. Part of this is special ed, and I'm going to ask Rich to go through that. And Shirley's on someplace, or she was on. There she is. If you have some questions on that. But the other thing that Jill and I were talking about is one of the big numbers that have also hit on the regular education side is every year we put into the budget a number based upon a reduction in salaries we were paying should a teacher leave. They leave at a higher rate, we hire somebody at a lower rate. That did not happen well this year. And so that had a deficit. I think the last one that I saw was about 300,000. So it's the special ed plus the turnover ratio that really accounted for the large share of what was going on in the school this year. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Adley and Rich, and you guys can discuss the deficit, some of the things you did, and where we are today.
Okay, thank you. So we're before you here for an appropriation, special appropriation for 181,000. We have delineated sort of where that has come from. Prior to making some of the reductions through Board of Education transfers and superintendent's adjustments, that was just over $1 million in expenses, and we've been able to realize savings to bring that down, including what we would call, a soft freeze. And a soft freeze means that Richard in the business office examines what is coming through the business office for payment. People can certainly encumber funds, but we put a stop basically on spending beyond what was encumbered by different departments. So that's something new to the district a little bit. The concept of a soft freeze. It's a bit different than a hard freeze, which is just completely everything gets analyzed. But to actually realize these savings, that's a step that the board and administration thought would be a positive thing. I'll ask Richard just to go through the numbers per se of how we got to the 181 and how we offset it a little bit.
So as was mentioned earlier, we did have a deficit in special education of just under 1.1 million. We did have a need for 11 RBT support staff, which we contracted for. We had about $500,000 in tuition overages. Of that $500,000, $200,000 related to a change in legislation that extended the age in which we have to provide educational services. Pupil evaluations exceeded budget by over $200,000, and then excess cost reimbursement ended up coming in at 66.7% against a budget of 7, which was lower, 70%, which was much lower than anticipated. As Jack mentioned earlier, we were short in staff turnover by another 324,000. So we had 66 teachers leave the district, and we really only accumulated savings of a little over $4,000 per teacher. When typically we would get between $14,000 and $15,000 per teacher. So all told, that's about $1.4 million if you bring in the staff turnover into the equation. The board did approve a number of transfers. We had one section at Holmes that we did not fill because enrollment did not meet expectations. We transferred those. We had some census changes in health insurance. We had some savings in heat and utility and snow removal. As Dr. Adley mentioned, we did do what's called a soft freeze, and we kind of slowed down spending towards the end of the year and started sweeping accounts. We contracted out a athletic trainer, which saved some money, and then Darien Summer School exceeded expectations. And so accumulating all those savings, we were able to bring the deficit down to 181,250, which is what the amount is requested for a supplemental appropriation.
By the way, just as when we talked about the budget in our last full RTM meeting, one of the things I said was fiscal year 25 and 26 aren't going to be any easier. So when the initial budget for 25 was put together, the 70% was also used. And if you go down to the 67%, that generated, I believe, another $240,000 thereabouts. That had to be found by the Board of Ed in what their reductions were going to be as they recast their budget. Is that a reasonable statement, Rich?
Yep. So some of the recast, we also included pupil evaluations. The board added another 75,000 and then a little over $180,000 to excess cost. I mean, one of the main drivers for the fiscal 25 budget was some of these special education costs, which include increases in tuition, for example, reduction in revenue for excess cost, and then additional pupil evaluations.
Yeah, I just want to keep in mind that some of the things that we're talking about now, there are things that are going on and are the challenges that the Board of Ed is going to have during the next fiscal year. Are there any questions on this? Go ahead, Jenny.
The 66 teachers who left, is that consistent with our experience, or is that high? Is that low? Is that something that
so last year, I believe we were 72 teachers, so in the ballpark, but slightly less. Pre-COVID, we were really in the 30 to 40 range, so we're much higher than the pre-COVID age. Marge, who's our director of human resources, likes to talk about how school districts kind of just trade teachers at this point. There's not a lot of new teachers coming into the field, and so we're stealing teachers from, let's say, Wilton, and they're stealing teachers from New Canaan, et cetera. So that's why we're not really seeing the savings that we used to pre-COVID.
do you expect, is that what the expectation for next year, maybe that your 5-year operating?
So we did bring down turnover savings in next year's budget. We brought it down to a little less than 400,000. So essentially what we actually achieved this year in savings.
Okay.
And so we're probably expecting that to be more consistent going forward.
Thank you.
I do want to say, Jill and I had a conversation on that. And so, Jill, do you mind adding some of our conversation?
Sure.
Because it may be different next year based upon what's happening in surrounding towns' budgets.
Yeah, I think a couple of things to understand about the turnover number. The pipeline of teachers coming in is somewhat constricted. Not surprisingly, it's a difficult profession, particularly in the post-COVID era, but we were seeing some constriction in that pipeline already. So the supply of younger teachers who are less expensive is much smaller. Therefore, we're having to just, in order to keep up with openings. We're just trading teachers between districts, and we're not saving dollars by hiring younger teachers. So that's a major factor in the fact that our turnover numbers are not what we historically see, even though our turnover in terms of actual bodies is much higher. I think also there's been an acceleration of retirements out of teachers leaving the profession. So that's what Jack is referring to, is that in the areas all around us, just as we received less dollars than we actually originally budgeted for, many districts around us are receiving less, and some are receiving quite a bit less. We're looking at Stanford, and Rich and Alan, correct me if I get any numbers wrong or I need to add anything. Stanford, I think, just cut 25 people. Shelton had to cut people in this current fiscal year and is looking at even more cuts for the coming year. Hartford is in serious trouble. Enfield is looking at very significant cuts, I think in the neighborhood of maybe 9 million. So I do think that because there's been a fiscal cliff, because so many federal funds are running out this year, we may see some differences in how the teaching pipeline looks, just because districts are having to run. In the positive parlance, it would be more efficiently. In the negative parlance, it would be doing more with less people.
And the other thing is that there may be more teachers available in the pipeline than they have in the past, only because of the cuts that other districts are doing. And Norwalk still hasn't figured out everything that they intend to do. Is there any, Beth, I thought you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I think this is partially answered by Jill, but so it sounds like long-term, just fewer people are going into teaching. So long-term, we're probably going to be looking at having to pay more for teachers, like say for a 10-year basis.
I think we have to wait and see a little bit. I know that the State Department of Education is in conversation with the higher education folks and looking at the teacher certification process. They also put into place a significant scholarship program for some young teachers. Again, Alan, Shirley, Rich, catch me if I forget something. But I think there are absolutely attempts to attract more teachers into the pipeline, and we may see some adjustment in how schools are running. But if we were to continue with the status quo, I think that would absolutely be true, Beth.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Charles, your question. Charles P. Up here, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm just intrigued as to why we're losing so many teachers. In the exit interviews, what are the reasons given as one of the, top 3 school districts in the entire state? A very vibrant student body. I would have thought it would have been an attractive place to teach. Are we not competitive from a salary perspective? The teachers can't afford to live in the area, so the commutes are too long. What are the reasons given as to why we're losing so many teachers if we're losing, more than twice as many as we did pre-COVID?
So I think people, Charlie, I think people are making some decisions, and you hit on some of those. The board has made the contract for our teachers and our administrators certainly more attractive for the staff. So that was one of the reasons. The commute and the ability to live close or live in town. People are making decisions around that. It's a high performing district, and I'll say with that comes high performing expectations for people. And that is a challenge. The whole COVID, people have been making life choices in terms of either exiting the profession or moving to a nearby town, who at the time, perhaps their salary was different than ours. But the board has done a nice job aligning those contracts to make it as attractive as possible. But you're hitting basically on all the right characteristics as to why people are stepping out.
I'm going to add something else that's a state issue. Teachers' pension and administrators' pension are transferable. So it doesn't matter what school district you're working in, you're still contributing to your state pension. So you could work 5 years in Stanford, 10 years in Darien, you live up in Monroe, and you move up to Monroe and you've lost nothing on your pension. And that allows for the mobility that's there. And quite honestly, when Malloy tried to hand the pensions back to the municipalities, the union was very concerned about that and was against that, because all of a sudden, if you're picking up a senior teacher's pension, school districts, regardless of what the age requirement, blah, 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 which none of us violate, would not be as attractive. And so that mobility based upon the pension is another contributing factor. They lose nothing if they're moving closer to home.
I think as a furtherance to that point, Jack, is the fact that, Charles, from what I understand, our neighboring districts are experiencing the same levels of turnover that are very disparate from what we saw pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, teachers tended to be very sedentary and to stay very much attached to a district. But post-COVID, we are seeing a lot more people move around for a variety of reasons that include certainly quality of life that Alan mentioned. It is less attractive. The difference that people were willing to commute for or to make other sacrifices for is much different than it used to be. So people are choosing to stay closer to home for a little bit less money, is what we're hearing. And Rich, I don't know if you have any numbers to support what I'm saying. I don't have numbers for New Canaan or anybody else, but.
No, I mean, everybody, as Jill mentioned, are losing a lot of teachers. They're seeing it in Stanford and Norwalk, Westport, and a lot of it is the commute. We do have a lot of teachers who live in the Danbury, Fairfield, Trumbull area. And so we've seen a lot leave to go into communities like, Fairfield, Newtown, Danbury. Everybody's kind of in the same boat. It's one of the reasons why we're back to kind of just like trading teachers back and forth.
Are there any other questions, or are we ready to vote? Hearing no questions, I need a motion to approve. Let me go to my glasses so I'm saying this right. To vote on the Board of Ed special appropriation request to fund an anticipated 2024 operating deficit in the amount of $181,250. Do I have a motion? I have Charles T. Do I have a second? I have Bill Dunn. All those in favor say aye. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Board of Ed and Jill for attending our meeting. And you guys can now enjoy your rest of the evening while we continue to work. Unless you want to just
Thank you,
hang
everyone.
out.
Thank you,
Oh,
everyone.
by the way, I mentioned this to Jill. On the agenda on the 17th, we moved these two items to the front of the RTM agenda since it is an in-person, and since you guys do show up for this, that your employees can get out of here a little bit sooner.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the consideration. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good night. Thank you.
So now we're if Monica can come back on, I'm going to give her a quick call if she's not there. Boom. Okay. So the next item to discuss is to take on action on an appropriation and bonding authorization for the preparation of a master plan for Great Island in the amount of now $1,425,000. Originally, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance approved up to $2 million because that was the highest bid, and that authorized the committee and Monica to start the negotiations. They did do some discussion on that, and these numbers may have changed slightly. But the master plan, which is only for phase 1 and phase 2, is costing $1,342,469. That's Reed Hildebrand, was the consultant selected. We hired an owner's representative in Redness and Mead, who does a lot of work on a lot of the mapping and other things. We've used them for our sewer work, our bridge work, and other things like that. And so let's see what's happening. Okay. So they're here for $45,000, and that's also partially to free up Ed Gentile, who's been moonlighting at his first job, doing both public works and Great Island, and has done an excellent job on both of them, quite honestly. But so we don't totally burn him out. It's nice to have some expertise there that can offset what we're hearing from the consultants. And again, this is phase 1 and phase 2. There's a phase 3 and a phase 4. And by having Redness and Mead there, it will provide some consistency should the town choose to go to another vendor for phase 3 or phase 4. So I don't know, Monica, did I properly explain that, or feel free to add anything you want?
No, I think you did a great job, Jack. As far as sticking with Redness and Mead, just so everybody understands that after we had kind of focused, zeroed in on Redness and Mead, we had a conversation with them about with Reed Hildebrand, we had a conversation with them about Redness and Mead, and they did reduce their fee by $20,000 because of work that Redness and Mead would be doing that they would no longer need to do. So instead of duplicating it, and so I think you can look at it as Redness and Mead for this phase 1 and 2. It's really an expenditure of $25,000, not $45,000, because we're getting a sort of a credit from Reed.
The other thing is there's a contingency of about $32,000, a little bit more. One of the conversations that I know Monica's had with myself, Kate, Ed Gentile, and Jen Chinesky is, look, we're going in, and I still like what Monica said very early on, that if you look at Great Island, you had 4 blank canvases, and maybe you just have 1 large blank canvas. So it's like building a new house or doing a kitchen. Guaranteed that over the time, there's things that will come up that were not anticipated, even though this is almost a who's who of the subcontractors that are doing this. And that gives a little flexibility to the team that's doing it. But we didn't want to give too much so that everybody thought that they could just run over budget. So, and then there's $5,000 for bonding. So I think there was something else I did want to mention associated. Oh, yes. One of the things that you're not reading in some of the documents that are there, but was that is in all the RFPs and all responded to, is that during phase 1 and phase 2, they will be providing some suggestions on governance of Great Island, which to me is very important, and many other people that. So do you want to expand on that a little bit, Monica, and then I'll go to Jenny?
I think that the committee, as the process went along, there were a couple of areas that we felt were really important to focus on. One of them was community engagement, and one of them was the financial advisory portion of that, which includes the governance. So those are important, and we didn't want to wait on those and push those back into phase 3 or phase 4. So the community engagement and the financial advisory services, including the governance advice, will be started in the very, very beginning. And that was important to the committee.
And that also will include, be right there with you, Malin. That's also going to include how do we want to fund some of this development? So whether or not
Right.
we're going to be taking contributions, whether or not we're going to be doing fundraising, whether or not we want some of the to be revenue generating outside of the leases, all those things will be part of that financial documentation. Malin and then Jenny.
Monica, if you could just take a step back and tell us, or at least tell me, because I'm a little, I just want to see like a bigger picture. I know you don't know what the master plan is going to suggest that we need to do to make Great Island, how we want it. But as far as the planning goes, is this stage one of the planning, and then will there be another type of consultant like this, or like what's kind of the body I'm not holding you to it, but like what is the planning, what do you think the planning is going to cost before we have to implement? Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah, you know what? I think it's an open-ended question because it's an open-ended process, right? So this first phase one, is creating a vision plan, and it's project familiarization, it's vision plan development, and it's public and stakeholder review and input. So the phase one and then the phase two, which is creating the master plan and the concept designs, those will both take approximately a year. And one of the reasons that we were able to negotiate a drop in the price was because we relaxed the schedule a little bit and added 2 more months, which I frankly think benefits both the consultant and the town. So whatever we decide during that first 1 year, that's going to determine how long the project takes and how the project develops. But we are looking at this firm to take us through all 4 phases. That's the intention right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wondered if we knew that after we get through this initial planning, that then that they'll want follow-up work that's going to be most likely it's going to be 1 to 2 million on the follow-up work. And then I just wondered if we knew of other things that were out there, just so we had the universe of what this whole kind of getting the plan drawn up is going to cost.
All right. So their total was 7.6 million, 7.66 million, and that included phase 3 and phase 4. But
Okay.
phase 3 and phase 4, it was really a challenge for all of these firms to go out that far because we didn't give them really
Sure.
a lot of guidelines.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
I
it was-
understand.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful though. Thank you.
But I want to stress that they have the bench, they have the sub firms on their list to help us through this whole process. So
Okay.
they have identified the companies that are best suited to take us through phase 4.
I just want to add 2 more things to that. First of all, you can in the report, what's going to happen is F&B is going to introduce this. We're only going to talk about the financial aspects of it, but we're also going to remind people of what the role of the RTM is on this. The RTM doesn't get to choose which consultant we use. That's solely the purview of the Board of Selectmen. And we did have input because we had Mark had a letter representing us. The Board of Finance had Pale in there. So, those 2 from a financial perspective, governance and other things like that, was very important. Just so happens that Mark was responsible for doing the background check on this firm, Redness and Mead. And in our conversation, he happened to mention a couple of things. Speaking to their prior clients, they're very much involved in engaging and getting feedback from the community. So that was really important. They also are considered very professional and hardworking. But lastly, which I think is somewhat important, is they're known to have a stiff upper back. So they're not going to be pushed around and they're going to be able to stand up to various constituencies and explain the situation, which Mark said that he's, and even his professional career, he's never really come across a company that had so much positive feedback from their clients on it. So Mark's going to be talking about that, because after we do the introduction, Mark, as our representative from the RTM on the Great Island Advisory Committee, will be explaining that. And of course, Monica's there as well. So I hope that also helps on part of the selection. Are there any other? Oh, go ahead, Charles. Charles P.
Monica, in terms of while we develop the master plan, we're still going to go ahead with the twinning of the road to get traffic access and some aspects of the parking. We're not going to wait for the final development of the master plan to be, to allow the town to have access to the property. Is that right? How are we going to balance those two needs?
So Charles, that's a good question. So, as you're probably aware, when we went out to bid for the road, we didn't receive any bids. I think that was due to a pretty aggressive timing schedule. We were asking these firms to make a commitment for work to be started about 6 weeks later, and their schedule was full. So we're planning on putting that back out to bid in probably hopefully by the end of this month, for work that will be done this fall. So widening the road is the first thing. We don't need parking if we're not going to have cars on the road. So will we look for some pocket parking after we get the road widened? Yes, we will. Now I'm going to tee this up because this will come back to you. If we want to have all of these firms had what I thought was a pretty interesting idea, and that's a quick win idea. And that's projects that we could do early in this process that would stand the test of time. We wouldn't need to redo them going forward, but they wouldn't be big projects. For instance, a walking trail. So there is not money put aside to do design and create the walking trail. If we do that, we will come back to the RTM for funding for that specific. And that will probably be one of the first things that we'll look to do. And that will not, we will not want to necessarily wait until the end of this vision process to do that. Because it's, a walking trail is I think a pretty solid idea. Does that answer your question, Charles?
Yeah, no, that does.
We're going to deal with this a little bit. I should have actually backed them together. But when the bonding was originally authorized, there's $11 million that is being rescinded, has been rescinded by the Board of Finance, will be rescinded by us. There's about $6,400,000, of which 1.8 million has been spent. The widening of the road, which is access, will be in there. Remediation will be in there, but none of the other projects will be. So one of the things by rescinding the 11 million is, and this was actually said during John Zagroski's presentation to the Board of Finance, this has any further development at Great Island being transparent and going through the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM. So I really applaud, first of all, the 11 million I wanted to get rid of a long time ago. So I'm happy that that's going away. But the other thing is bringing everything back to the RTM is equally important for its transparency. And that's part of what Monica was saying. If we do a walking path, the cost of that will come back. Jenny.
Couple questions. First, on Monica, you mentioned a $7 million number. Is that a construction number for phase one? Or there's no construction, but what's that number for?
That was what they estimated for total fees for all 4 phases.
For all 4 phases, okay.
Right.
And I know that they refer to construction numbers, which really doesn't apply here, but they have some construction numbers that they put into their proposal based upon what, I'm not sure. But you awarded, the Great Island Advisory Committee awarded based solely on phase 1 and phase 2, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then are you, as far as the timetable for phase 1 and phase 2, you said it's gonna be about a year
Correct.
to do that? I just would, starting when? When is that gonna start?
Well, we're anticipating a kickoff meeting mid-July, July 15th, and then the first public engagement meeting back, working with the Darien schedule when kids get back to school and everybody is back in town. So that's more like the week of September 16th.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, we're starting to get in the throes of summertime. A lot of people get
Right.
away, so I'm glad to hear that the public, the first real engagement for the public is gonna be when people are actually in town, which would be great. Last question is on the advisory committee. I know that the initial advisory committee that's in place was set up with the expectation that it would change over. That it was just to initially get the ball rolling. Is there any talk about expanding or changing the advisory committee?
You know, not right now, Jenny. I think that they've done a really, really good job. And I have to say, I don't know if Jack shared this. I just did this outline, actually just for myself to just figure out where we had spent all of our time. But the committee has been very, very dedicated to this process so far. So I'm really happy with the makeup.
So it's
I
probably
also-
not gonna change.
Well, what-
No intentions right now, no.
I also believe, and I can't put my finger on it, but I know, I thought that the Board of Selectmen expanded the charter of the advisory committee, maybe
We
as
did.
much as 6 months ago or so, when they started from what they originally were. And so the charter of what that committee is not the initial charter when they were first looking at it.
Correct.
So they do have a wider charter there. What it is, I just wanted them to expand, and I figured the Board of Selectmen could figure that out without input from us. But so they do have a wider charter there.
And Melinda, if anyone, the RFP, if in case you wanted to see what the questions were, I don't know, I don't think we can see the responses, but the questions I think I was able to get from Town Hall. Just so you can understand what the different phases. The first question I was gonna ask is, Monica, why don't you explain for the public what phase 1 and phase 2 are? And you actually did it before I even asked you. But those are outlined in the RFP, so you can get a very clear understanding that it's really you took the full RFP basically and decided only to focus on the first half, which is great. I think it's a great move.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have it's more of a manpower question rather than talking dollars. What I'd like to know is what manpower capacity do we expect to be provided in phase 1 and 2? So how many FTEs working at what percentage for what length of time?
That's in the fee proposal, Charles.
Okay.
It breaks it out by the number of hours per sub, what their rate is per task. So Reed Hildebrand did an exceptional job on that particular part of the proposal.
Okay. And you guys are confident that the manpower or person power capacity that they're proposing is reasonable?
Yes, but I'm also deferring to the experts, right? They actually Reed had come for the Darien Men's Association, so they had toured the property already, but they submitted the RFQ. They then came and toured the property. I took them on the property myself for 2 hours. We had interviews with them for 2 hours. So they're pretty familiar with and then the town has provided a lot of background information. So I know that this firm, we as excited as we are to have identified what we think is the very, very best out of very, very, very good firms. We had 16 firms that we started with. We narrowed it down to 6, then we narrowed it down to 1, then we narrowed it down to, or 4, and then we narrowed it down to 1. Frankly, all 16 were fantastic. So, but I have full confidence that they have a very good understanding of what's involved with phase 1 and 2, and they have adjusted their schedule and their manpower to provide a superior product for us.
Yeah, I should add that the 16 that you started with, this wasn't just Connecticut, New England planners. This
No.
was this was national planners who have done major projects in cities and other areas around the country.
And around the
So,
world, really.
Yeah, it was an impressive list.
Right. We were told that we would get a good turnout, but we were really, really thrilled with the caliber as well as the number.
So, are we ready to vote so Monica can be freed for the evening? Do I have a motion to, again, let me put my glasses on. Do I have a motion to take action on appropriation and bonding authorization for the preparation of a master plan for Great Island in the amount of $1,425,000? I need somebody to move. Bill Dunn will move. Louisa will second. Are we ready to vote? All in favor? Say aye. Good enough. Passes unanimously. Monica, thank you so much. I do have one more question for you. If I take the document that you handed to me, I also passed it to Mark Adeletta since he's going to have to talk on this after we talk about the finances. Do you mind if I give that package to Krista to be distributed to the RTM, or do you want to play with that a little bit?
Yeah, let me play with it because you know what? There was a rounding error of $1, so I sent that to you. It doesn't change the final number.
Right.
But it reduced by $1 the contingency. So let me just take another sweep through this, but sure.
If you could do that with your name on it, and since we're dealing with Krista, who at times when it comes to sending out packages and that scares the bejeebies out of me, if you can send me a copy and Mark Adeletta and Krista and Seth a copy by Wednesday, close of business Wednesday, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure. Happy to.
Thank you, Monica. I appreciate it. Next on our agenda. This one's pretty simple. Other than they're cutting out my cut-through road to get to my house when I go to the other side of town. So I have to find a new Lewis and Clark road to go through. There are 3 easements on 88 Hanson, 100 Hanson, and 419 Hollow Tree Road, which is the country club. Those easements, Amy Zabatakis will explain them to us. Our process in it is the total amount that the town will be paying for these easements based upon what they perceive the cost to the homeowners are is approximately $27,000 split amongst the 3 of those residents. The $27,000 was in the original appropriation and bonding that was done for $2 million. So it's not an incremental cost, but we will report on it as secondary on that commission. Are there any questions? A motion take action on the easement agreements for 88 Hanson, 100 Hanson, and 419 Hollow Tree Road associated with the Hanson Road Bridge project. Can I have somebody move that? I'll take Peter M. and I'll take Bill Smith to second that. Any questions on that? Seeing none, are we ready to vote? All in favor? Next. In the project that just keeps on giving, the shuffle. The shuffle was audited. It came on out with some questionable things from the state audit. This is primarily on 35 Leroy. There was some questions on some documentation, other things like that. The Board of Ed, Jen Chinesky and Kate, worked with the state audit, and the amount that they need back is $67,514. This closes the shuffle expenses that once and for all, since the funds that we received is now audited and will be paid. So it's a special appropriation. I need somebody to move that. I have Malin moving. I need a second. Oh, your hand is up, Louisa, so you just got it for moving it. Is there any discussion on that? I sent around some documentation on it. There's not a whole heck of a lot that we can do, but they did get it down from the original amount by providing the necessary documentation and satisfying the state. Seeing no questions, are we ready to vote? All in favor? This gets to the I know that you've heard myself and several others talk about that we originally approved 103 million, of which 85 was done for the cost, another 6,400,000 plus change was done for the access. We use that to purchase the circle, do some remediation and some other work and legal fees associated with that. That left a remaining balance of $11,693,633 from the original authorization. The Board of Finance has taken action to rescind that amount, so it would no longer be authorized but unissued. It does require the RTM to approve this rescission. As I said, out of the 6,400,000, about 1.8 million has been spent. That included the purchase of the circle, some preliminary remediation. Conversation that I've had with Jen, the remediate, we're going to have whatever it is to widen the road, and I'll have a rough estimate for that of what they're planning, but they're sending it out to bid again, so I'm not going to be too open with that. And the rest is that there's still work to do on remediation. One of my responses, Charles, to you, Charles P., about gaining access, it's my standard joke about Great Island. There are no public bathrooms there. So unless we want to increase the cost of remediation because people are running to the wilderness to relieve themselves, that's part of the thing that's limiting certain access. So it's unfortunate, but that, that's one of the things that they're going to have to increase the access to Great Island. They're going to have to figure out how to have some public restrooms there.
There must be some washrooms in the stables, aren't there? But
not open and available. There are, but
yeah,
they're not open and available at this time. So, anyway, is there any further discussion on rescinding the 11 million? Did Jenny, did I have somebody move that?
Not yet.
Okay, so let's move that. I need somebody to move the motion. Peter M., Jenny, you second. If there's no further questions, are we ready to vote? All in favor? That passes unanimously. Okay. Lastly, the Green Bank. This is amendments to the Green Bank Agreement with the town of Darien, authorizing the first selectman to sign the amended agreement. In 2014, the town entered into with with a third party in town, a Green Bank agreement of which we were party to. And at that time, the municipalities were acting as a conduit to collect the repayment of the Green Bank funds and transfer it to the Green Bank. In 2021, I believe, the municipalities were relieved of that responsibility, and also they reduced the $500 a year they were paying us to do it, which actually was a cost saving because it was costing us more than $500 to do this. The Green Bank is a Clean Air Act, and it provides funds for that. We have to agree to the amendments. Basically, what it does is it's changing things, like instead of mentioning the Green Bank to the authority, changes the address of the Green Bank. There, instead of using specific terms in the general statutes of Connecticut, they're dealing with it at a higher level. And since the town really has no responsibility other than we signed the original agreement, this is more of a legal action of us to approve the amendments. And so the commercial property that took out the Green Bank loan can move forward with this. That's it basically in a nutshell. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to approve. So I have Louisa moving, I have Bill Smith seconding. All in favor, raise your hand. That's great. That takes care of that. We've actually moved fairly quickly. So the only other thing other than outstanding minutes is there is some work that's going to be done during the course of the year. During the summer, we're going, John Zagroski is organizing a group to work with the Board of Ed to stop the security items, and there's been about 3 or 4 coming off cycle. That's not how we do business. Quite honestly, had the security for $1,074,000 been done on a timely basis, it would have added about 9 basis points to our tax rate, and probably the bonding of the $1.4 million for Great Island, we then could have used out of our general fund funds. Such was not the case, but we do want school security items and other things coming out to be coming through the normal cycle. And I think both Jim Palin and I have been very vocal about not approving how the Board of Ed has been doing this. So that's one of the things that'll be done. The other thing that's my understanding is that I am going to ask Jen to come to our committee to explain the new Moody's formula for how they're rating towns and municipalities. It has changed, which is changing what our amount is. I always think that it should be 16% of what our revenues are. The bottom that everybody talks about is 12, but we're never getting to 12. That's far too little to remain with AAA rating, especially with the amount of debt that we have on our books authorized. So I think that would be good exercise for Jen to be there. And it's my understanding there's also going to be a discussion at the Board of Finance level, to which we'll participate in, on determining what guidance should be for the next budget year. There was a lot of discussion not only on the board, but also from the Board of Ed and other parties on how guidance was determined. So that pretty much wraps it up. Is there any comments that people have on how this budget process works? Melinda, go ahead.
Just one additional thing about the Board of Ed, and you saw it in some of the questions that we all had on the security, but it would be really helpful if we got information as soon that impacts budgets as soon as possible, like when there's a policy decision. Because when when things come to us 2 years later, it's, we really can't vote no. I mean, not that I was inclined to tonight, that's not what I'm saying, but the example that you used one time was if you hire a Chinese teacher in the middle school to teach your sixth graders, the next year you're going to have to hire one for seventh grade also, so like it would be just really nice if when we're approving, if when these things came, that they were more complete, if that makes any sense.
No, that's been something that Beth has mentioned for the last 2 to 3 years in F&B's presentation to them, that, it'd be nice that we see if you're implementing a new policy, a new program, that they at least put out a 5-year pro forma on what the real cost of that program will be. Currently, that still falls on deaf ears, but there are some things that we are working with them on to do that. And,
Well, I mean, the only recourse is we start voting no on stuff. But when there were decisions made on building a new Ox Ridge school, it was, you said it tonight, but just not as maybe, frankly, as I would have. But like, you should have come then. Like, you should have known then what decision you were really making and what the impact was going to be.
Listen to my discussion on that at the last Rules Committee, and you'll see that they heard it in executive session, if you recall, and Monica supported the same comment. They heard it in a private conversation I've had with them. They heard it at Rules, so I figured I'd give them a break by not hearing the same soapbox that this should have been brought to us 3 years ago, saying we're implementing this. My estimated cost, which nobody can give me a real cost for, but my estimated cost of hardening the exterior of the building is between 1.5 to $2 million. And that's a significant number to have done. With first having the executive session, I want to compliment Jay-Z, because John pulled together the concept of the one, Melinda, you were there, Peter was there, Beth, you were there, pulled together that group, because we're all a little tired of, just because it's security and I can say 3 words on it, not fully understanding what it is. And so, yes, we're going to be bringing them back on several of these things.
Well, also, it should have been known that we needed to do mechanical or, exterior hardening when security guards were hired. Like, it should have, like, I'm saying even bigger even than just one little thing. Like probably people would have been very happy to not have security guards, knowing that we were going to do what we just passed tonight. Maybe. I'm just saying, like, you didn't have all the information. And now you have 7 people and ballooning costs in your elementary school, in your schools, and it's hard to go backwards. And the complete security package was not laid out so that people could make proper decisions.
I fully agree with that. But on the other side, what I think the Board of Ed is starting to hear is, I don't think the parents quite understand that yet, but if we're spending $500,000 to $600,000 on an annual basis for security guards, also campus monitors and the like, and that's a decision that the town has made or the Board of Ed has made, it's their authority to do it, they have to figure out what other efficiencies they have to cover some of those costs. It's not that you get that plus everything else you want. And that's part of what they experienced this year by the Board of Finance's reduction in their request for funding. So that's part of it. You can't be a petulant child and get everything. That's not how any of us raised our children. And definitely, the Board of Ed isn't much different. They have to make the tough decisions that if I want to move forward with X and Y, what other efficiencies am I finding to cover this? Like, to be quite honest, you knew that the transportation was coming through, and last minute we were able to authorize the payment for the vans and that. But that would have been nice to start to look at that last summer and have it included in the budget. So, as opposed to, you have Damocles sword hanging over you, and that's why all of a sudden you're looking for efficiency. There's another efficiency that I saw that was proposed that based upon the cost of outside landscapers to some of the properties, it's determined, I don't know if the Board of Ed actually approved this, but it was determined by hiring another maintenance person, we'd actually save money. So we wouldn't need to be hiring these outside landscaping firms to take care of some of the properties. Those are the things that they really have to be looking at going into the budget, not when they fear that the budget isn't going to be everything they want. So, but I agree with you. This wasn't handled the way I'd like, and you heard me just say to Leon, he came from a different organization. I think you heard me say in the executive session we had with John that I've been told that other towns do all of their security for their schools as a special appropriation. And my private conversation said, I don't really give a blank what other towns do. I care about what our town does. And we have certain processes and procedures, which is why we remain AAA rated and have appropriate funds in our general fund. So you're preaching to the choir to me. So we'll have to see how things work out next year.
Well, I feel like that it's very difficult for us to do our job when little things come and there's no context, and I've passed this along to various Board of Ed members, but what I'm talking about is what does it cost us to have a team model at the middle school, right? Like that's a decision. Like big savings either has to come from increasing class size, changing your middle school model, or getting rid of some of your security. Like there's just, and yes, there's efficiencies on the edge, but those are the big buckets. And
well, you're missing one of the popular ones that some people will challenge is, and I'm just
sports.
using
I know, but like
athletics.
Yeah, well, I know it's crazy.
30 freshmen on a lacrosse team is just, we're paying for extra coaches, travel, and other things like that along those lines. So those are the other things that they really have to take a deep dive on.
It's just not as big as the other buckets. But anyway, I would
agree.
I would just like to see more role. Like I know we have to deal with sometimes the little stuff, but I would like to see it put in a large, more context so we can make better choices.
Well, better understand.
Better understanding is really
right. Because at the end of the day, it's still their choice how they're going to spend their money.
Right.
Our choice and the Board of Finance's choice, and we had very good communications between our committee and the Board of Finance when it came to the Board of Ed budget as well as the Board of Selectmen budget this year, I thought, is how much you're getting. And so that tells us whether or not things are making sense. But at the end of the day, we can suggest a decrease in their increase, but how they spend that money,
Yeah, of course.
especially on the Board of Ed, is still theirs.
Yes, of course.
Any other comments on year end? If not, we can hand this over to Jenny so she can do minutes.
Hopefully you guys got another copy of the minutes from our April 24th meeting, which was a big meeting. Any questions or comments or edits? And if not, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from our April 24th meeting? Charlie Powis and Louisa. All in favor? Beautiful, thank you.
Before we end this meeting, I want to thank everyone for all the work that you guys did on the budget and all these. We had a lot of resolutions this year. And I don't think it's going to be slowing down for what we're involved in. So I do want to thank everyone for their time, their efforts, their questions. This committee does challenge a lot of the boards, and I participated in a study that's being done by Jay-Z, and with 3 individuals on how to increase efficiency in that. And my comment basically, and this goes in line with what you were saying, Lynn, is that the RTM gets involved when some of the boards are perceived, not the word I used, to not be doing their job. So if the RTM feels that something is missing, even something as simple as 8 years ago, we did a sidewalk study. You know, you can't just put that up in a shelf and say, okay, we did it 8 years ago. It should be coming back down and relooked and evaluated. It was a great study being done. You know, where are we? What has changed and other things like that. And so those type of actions and other things like that, to me, is part of the RTM's job. And
I just want to add something too, Jack. You know, I think especially these last couple of years where the RTM, or certainly our committee, has been a lot more elevated and active. I think the other boards need to remember that they should think of us as their flank. As you know, we have a different perspective. You know, people on the major boards and the commissions, they get, you know, they've got a lot of work to do, and RTM members are in constant contact with, you know, the average taxpayer, right? Our neighbors and friends at parks, so that when we're getting feedback and it's coming in a way that's, you know, we're getting feedback that is opposing what's being done by the other boards. We're supposed to be helping our town boards make better decisions that are reflective. And so, you know, we're not raising red flags because we like it. We're doing it because we're trying to be helpful to say, this is a perspective that the town boards need to be considering.
I'm going to add that to a little bit. I think that we've been able to be as active as we've had because we've had good working relationships with the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Education. And so those relationships where we're being treated as a partner, not as an opponent, is what allows at least this committee to move forward. And so I want to thank, you know, Monica when she was the first selectman, and Jay-Z for the work that they do, for inviting us to participate with them. Because, you know, if we're not working as a team throughout this town, it's a self-defeating effort. So I think the leadership that we've had there has been good and allows this committee to be as active as it has been. So you know, yes, we hear things and yes, we inform them, but you know, we understand what our purview is. You know, that we are part of the budget making authority of this town, but we also have to understand the purview of those boards. And, you know, Malin, as we said, we can request that they give us a 5-year pro forma on this. And if they don't, there's not much we can do about it. You know, because that is their job. We need their board to be asking their administration to be giving them that type of stuff. I get it from the Board of Selectmen. You know, if I'm speaking to Kate or Jen, and you know, just to get backfill on something, we get those answers. And you know, fortunately, many of the RTM committees have very good working relationships with their counterparts at the Board of Selectmen, and that allows things to run as well as it has been. So, you know, that
Well,
teamwork to
I
me is
just-
important.
I just feel like with poor information that it's, you know, some of these off-cycle stuff, it's just very difficult. And the security is a perfect example, because a complete security plan just may have made the understanding. I know we can't say specifics to the community, but might have just saved our taxpayers a lot of money in ongoing personnel costs. But
Yeah.
that's just,
All right. So if we're done, we can again want to thank Monica for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
And you know, I want to congratulate you on the work that you've done on Great Island. I know it's, you know, it's really like a full-time job of what you've been doing. And I know that even though you're elected official, it you know, it's a lot of work. And so thank you for providing us with the package and your leadership on that. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Boy, everybody's hand went up on that one. I'll take Beth as making the motion. I'll take Bill as the second. All in favor? Thank you very much for a very good meeting. And thanks again for all the work that you did this year. For those that for whatever reason missed the RTM meeting, it is my typical practice of having people stand up so that the rest of the RTM recognizes who this committee is, because while I get to be the face of it and they hear far too much of my voice, it is a team that gets us to the reports that we do. Anyway, with that, have a pleasant evening, and I can stop recording.
Thank you, everyone.
thanks, Jeff.